Okay, in this video we are going to look at a few of the muscles of the upper extremity. Alright, again we are back on the visible body program, and for our class, again we are going through the objectives for Biology 201. We're not going to cover all of the muscles of the upper extremity. There's only going to be a handful that you are going to be required to know. And of the muscles that you are required to know, you are also, let me just make sure, you're required to know the actions of those muscles. Now, when you're looking at muscles, and especially if you're going to go on into your physical therapy program, occupational therapy, or learning more about muscles in themselves, the easiest way to learn the basics of muscle, meaning the basics, name the muscle, name the action. Okay, that's going to be the really basics. The next level up is going to be origin, insertion, innervation. Okay, but for our purposes right now, the easiest way to learn the basics of the muscle, name and action, is to break the muscle down or categorize the muscles. Okay, so we have head and neck muscles, we've got anterior chest, back muscles, and so forth. So we're going to break it down to the upper extremity. You can break the upper extremity down actually into 4 separate regions. You're going to have your arm, which is proximal to the elbow. You have your forearm distal, okay, to the elbow. You're going to have an anterior, and then you have a posterior. So you're going to have an anterior arm, anterior forearm, posterior forearm, okay? So when you're learning the muscles, break it down into its various compartments. So we'll start with your anterior arm. Now, looking at the actions, for the most part, the actions are going to be the same. There's some subtle differences here and there, okay? So for your anterior arm, you're looking essentially elbow flexion, okay? Now there's going to be supination in there, and I'll point those out. Posterior, you're contracting this muscle. It's going to be pulling on your elbow, so elbow extension. So if it's anterior, it's going to have some kind of a flexing component to it. Posterior, extension. Same thing with your forearm. Anteriorly, when these muscles contract, it's going to cause wrist flexion, finger flexion, those sort of things. Posteriorly, you're going to be looking at wrist extension, finger extension, okay? So you're looking at those. So that's an easy way of identifying what the action is. Now, just don't go by the very basics. So if you say anterior arm is only elbow flexion, and that's the only answer you would put, that might not be correct depending on the specific muscle. So again, if you're not in my class and just looking at this on YouTube, you want to go through a little bit more specific. Now, depending on the resource or the textbook that you're using, there are subtle differences between the different books. For my class, and what you will be tested on will be on the McGraw-Hill textbook, which everybody should have a copy of that one. This is going to be the 3rd edition on this. So that's what we're going to be using. Although I recommend to learn some of this, also look at the Visible Body program. You also have AP Revealed, which comes with your tuition. Okay, so that's an option on looking at these as well. But always look at the models or the cadaver, because you will not be tested on pictures, you will be tested on models or the cadaver. Okay, with that big old long disclaimer, let's get started. So I've broken these down into, I'm just looking at my list so I can get them correct here. So let's look at 1636 on this one. So we're going to be dealing with the anterior not forearm muscles. I want anterior arm. Where are we at? Oh, okay, here it is. I was reading this thing. Elbow flexors. Okay, so it's flexing the forearm. It just kind of worded weird. Okay, so we're looking at your arm in this area. Let's just zoom out just a little bit on this. Okay, when we're looking at this, visible body breaks down the biceps into a long head and short head. Okay, and I believe our objectives just says biceps brachii. Okay, so the course doesn't separate those out, but I'll point them out here so you can see what those differences are. So we're going to have a long head of the biceps. Okay, again, this is going to be your anterior arm area. And then you're going to have your short head is going to be this one. Now your anterior, it looks like it inserts, origin is on the humerus. Actually, it's going through this intertubercular groove. So if you're looking at the models, it's going through the intertubercular groove, and it comes up and inserts into part of the scapula. Okay, so the long head actually crosses the glenohumeral joint. So this is going to cause slight flexion of the arm at the shoulder, although that's a weak flexor at the shoulder. Okay, the primary action between the long head, which is this one, and then the short head, which is this one, again, put together, that's just your big old gun on this one. They both cross the elbow essentially. It inserts into your radial tuberosity. So if I'm not mistaken, that's something that you had to learn. So if you look at the radius and you've got at the proximal end of the radius, you got that little bump right below the radial head. That's the radial tuberosity. So they insert into there, and this is just an aponeurosis, okay, associated with that. So both the long and short heads of the biceps primarily deal with elbow flexion, and specifically with the short head, it's going to be a strong supinator of your forearm. Okay, so that's going to be the biceps brachii, and both of these muscles are innervated by the musculocutaneous nerve. We haven't done nervous system yet. You'll get into that here in another week or so. Okay. The next one is going to be the brachialis muscle. So up top, or superficial, I should say. Superficial, we have our long and short heads of the biceps brachii. Deep to that is the brachialis. So we're kind of looking at it lateral to medial. You can see the biceps is anterior, brachialis is deep to that. And the the brachialis of this one also going to be dealing with elbow flexion. So let me just hide these completely. I can't even see it with it faded. Let's just hide these completely. Let me get rid of that aponeurosis as well. And zoom in on this one. So this is the brachialis. So you can see it crosses the joint. Let me get rid of this joint capsule on here, so you can see where it inserts into this area. So you can see it crosses the elbow, and when this muscle contracts, it will shorten, and it's going to be pulling on this, causing that motion. Okay, and that one's also innervated by the musculocutaneous nerve. I do not believe we need to know the brachioradialis. No, we do not. So let's zoom out of this one and go into the next one, 1637. Now let's look at the posterior compartment. Oh, let me back up. Biceps brachii. What does bi mean? Two. Okay, there's two heads to the biceps. Long head, short head. This muscle, triceps. Any guesses to how many muscle bellies we have? Try 3. So you know there's going to be 3 parts to it. Okay. There's a lateral and medial, and then there's a long. Okay, so let's look at this one. Let's pull this up. So now we're posterior. Okay, on here you can see the anterior. Now we're posterior muscles on this one, and all of these have essentially the same function, which is forearm or elbow extension. Okay, biceps and brachialis does flexion. Triceps is going to do extension. Okay, all 3 heads, lateral, medial, and long, deal with this one. So And again, I'm not going to break these down. Hey, maybe that might be an extra credit question. That's an idea. Okay. So we're going to have different things. We're going to have the long head on this one, then the medial and lateral. Okay, so this is going to be the lateral head. Obviously, it's on the lateral side. Medial. Okay, here's the humerus. It's not anterior. We just turned it around so we could see it. Okay, so you can let me kind of rotate this, but let me get rid of some of these ribs. Just remove some of these ribs so you can kind of get a view of anterior and posterior kind of stuff. Okay, so if we've got this one, okay, so this is the medial head. You can see the body of it is more medial. That one's going to be the long head. Okay, this is basically, it's crossing and inserting way up towards the scapula on this one. That's the medial head, and then that's the lateral head. So posteriorly, we're looking at this one. This is going to be the lateral on the lateral side. This is the long. It looks like medial. I know it does, but medial is actually going to be deep to this. So let me fade. Oh, I said hide. Okay, and that's going to be the medial. Okay. Okay, so you can see most of it's on the medial side of this one. Okay, and posterior musculature on the arm is going to be the radial nerve. Okay. The next area, oh, we just got 2 more to go. That's pretty simple. Okay, so we got forearm area. So what video is that? That's going to be 1639. 1639. Okay, so this is going to be the forearm, and the muscles we need to know on here, we're going to have 2 different ones that deal with wrist flexion and digit flexion. Okay, the first one is going to be the Flexor Digitorum Superficialis, right here. That's going to be your primary one. Now we do have a couple muscles that are superficial to that. Okay, I'm not going to ask you those. On the models, you will still see those, okay? But when we're looking at the superficialis, even though it's deep to these, okay, that's going to be this one, and you're going to look at the model, and you're going to have most of these tendons that come down, that go into the digits, and goes way out to the distal end, okay? This is the Flexor Digitorum Superficialis. This is going to be the median nerve that innervates this one. It does wrist flexion, and if you recall back into your skeletal system, you've got your phalange. We've got different parts of your phalange: proximal, middle, distal phalange. Okay, so the Flexor Digitorum digit, superficialis goes to the proximal and middle phalanx, and it does flexion with this. Okay, so it does not the distal one, but it does the flexion of this and wrist flexion. Okay. Key thing on here, when you say the name superficialis, think superficial. Okay, because the next one is going to be Flexor Digitorum Profundis, which is actually deep to the superficialis. So that's going to be on the next one. See, superficial flexors, deep flexors. And profundus is this one. So it kind of looks like the other one, but it's deep to it. Okay. This is also going to be dealing with wrist flexion, and it's going to flex the distal phalanx. So you can see how these go all the way down to the distal phalanx. So if you tighten up this muscle, it pulls on the tendon, which pulls on your distal phalanx, and at the process is going to be flexing at the wrist as well. Now the interesting thing with this one, it's innervated by 2 nerves. The medial side, okay, so we got half of this muscle. Okay, cut the muscle in half. The medial half of this one is innervated by the ulnar nerve. The lateral half is by the median nerve, which is kind of cool. Okay. The last one is going to be the posterior forearm, which is going to be extensors. And I think we're going to do 1641, 1641. Yeah, so we're just going to be doing the superficial ones. Which one do we need to know? I didn't write down the name. Extensor Digitorum. Okay, so Extensor Digitorum. Same idea as the anterior ones. Well, all of them are gone there. The anterior one, you've got all these different tendons coming down to the digits. Okay, this is going to be dealing with wrist extension as well as the extension at the MP joint, metacarpal, this area, phalangeal, MP joint, metacarpal phalangeal joint. So it's going to be inserting here, whoop, extending that back as well. All of those, as well as the anterior, digits 2 through 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, not the thumb. Thumb is different. Okay. And I think that is it for what we need to know for lab on this one. So know the name, know the actions of those muscles. Might be a couple extra credits in there. You never know. And next one we're going to be doing, I think, 3 muscles for the trunk area. All right, that's it for today, or for this video.